This was supposed to be a very easy plumbing project, one that I've done several times before. But as so many plumbing projects do, it took 3 trips to Menards and about 3 hours. At one point, it was even raining from my basement ceiling. A tiny bit about me: I'm a homeowner, not a plumber. Years ago, I replaced about 80% of the plumbing in my old house, so I'm not a beginner. Sometimes, though, we forget. We don't really think clearly. We get ahead of ourselves. So this is a story about overconfidence, water, and what not to do. I needed to replace the internals of one of our toilets, and for those who have never done that, it's trivial. At max, you have to unscrew 2 nuts, often just one. You buy a kit at the hardware store, turn off the water to the toilet, swap the parts, turn the water back on, and move on to happy flushing. For tools, one pair of channel lock adjustable pliers is pretty much all you need. In my case, the valve inside the toilet wouldn't stop running, so I needed to shut off the water to the toilet before going to the store. And this is where it gets interesting. I shut off the water behind the toilet, and it started spraying everywhere. So now I don't have a toilet problem, I have a valve problem. Fast forward to Menards, I'm standing in the plumbing aisle staring at about 12 different shutoff valves. They're mostly standard, but there's just enough permutations to ruin your day. Some are straight, some have a 90-degree bend, some are compression, some are threaded. I'm looking at my phone, and I had taken a real quick picture before I left the house, and that picture wasn't very good. So I couldn't figure out which one I needed. I couldn't see the threads, I couldn't really ascertain the sizes. So I texted my wife and asked her to send me a better picture. Once I got that, visually I could narrow it down to about 2. I made my best guess. When I got home, it only took about 30 seconds to realize that I'd bought the wrong valve. Back to Menards. I exchanged the valve, drove home, and this time I was pretty sure I had the right one. Before I started, though, something else occurred to me. I have a 2-story house with a basement. If I remove a valve on the first floor, there's a lot of water in the pipe sitting above me. So I did what I thought was smart. I shut off the water main in the basement. I opened 3 sinks on the first floor. I opened 1 sink on the second to let some air in. And then I let the water drain out for a good 10 minutes. It just kept going. I was kind of surprised at how long the water kept going. Anyway, I thought, all right, we're good. So I removed the toilet internals. I disconnected the supply line. I put down some towels to catch the small amount of water that I expected was going to drip from the back of the tank. And all of this went exactly as expected. And then, before I started working on the shutoff valve, I took the new valve out to the garage so that I could get the right size wrenches, because I didn't want to have to bring a bunch of wrenches into the bathroom. I figured the old one looks about the same as the new one, so the wrenches should be about the same size. Well, they weren't. I needed to make a trip back to the garage, more wrenches, and somehow, and I don't know how, I needed both metric and SAE. Who knows? When I finally got the valve body off, that's when I realized something important. There was still a lot of water in that system. Above the valve, which sits about 2 inches off the floor, there's probably 30 inches of vertical pipe feeding multiple fixtures. There's 2 toilets, a shower, and then there's a kitchen. I grabbed a couple more towels, which was wildly optimistic, but I figured that I could probably swap this thing out before too much more of the water even bled out. So as the water is flowing out onto these towels, I tried to remove the lower compression nut from the little copper stub of pipe that's coming off the floor. That nut is going nowhere. Inside it, there's a compression ring, also known as a ferrule, and it is basically welded to the pipe after 20 years of use. I can't yank on the pipe because I don't want to bend anything, and I don't want to break any connection in the basement. I tried using some pliers. Yeah, that wasn't going to work. Nothing was happening there. So I'm laying on the floor in a puddle, contemplating how to remove this compression ring, and I hear a sound from the basement. I ran downstairs, and it is raining. It's not dripping, it is raining. There's about a 6 foot by 6 foot wet area on the floor, and I've got water coming down out of the ceiling everywhere, as these pipes just continue to drain, completely exceeding the capacity of the towels that I have on the floor. This was not the plan. Fortunately, my basement is unfinished. There may have been some swearing. Okay, there was a lot of swearing. And at that point, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to try to put the new valve body on the old compression nut and the old compression ring. And so I did that, and then I turned the water back on. And you know what? It leaked. Of course it leaked. But that's on me. So how am I going to remove this compression ring? Using a Dremel might work, but I have to cut the nut to get to the ring, and then I have to cut the ring. And in doing that, I'd have to not nick the pipe in the process, because if I nick the pipe, then the new ring isn't going to seal. And then operating a Dremel while lying in a puddle, yeah, that's probably putting one bad decision inside another one. So I turned to Google, and guess what? There's a tool for this. So back to Menards. Back at Menards, I buy a compression ring remover. It's a tool I didn't even know existed until 15 minutes ago. And of course, I had to check out through a third lane so that the prior two checkers wouldn't recognize me and realize this was my third trip. Back at home, I redrained the pipes, and something finally dawned on me. We have exterior spigots on our house, and they sit below the first floor plumbing. Once I opened one of those, a lot more water came out. Yeah, that would have been useful to realize earlier. So after studying this compression fitting remover for a while, I gave it a shot. So here I am. I'm lying on my side between the toilet and the wall, holding the jaws of this thing together with my left hand, and then trying to turn this T-screw thing with my right, and the jaws just kept popping off. Ultimately, I needed to squeeze this thing with my left hand as hard as I could while putting about the same amount of effort into my right hand. It took about 15 minutes, but I could tell that it was slowly easing its way off, and it finally did come off. And then, with everything drained, with that compression fitting off, it took less than 15 minutes to get the new valve on, the toilet internals in, and be back to flushing. So what did I learn from all of this? One, I really hate plumbing. But more importantly, take really good close-up pictures before you go to the store, and don't guess. Two, pipes hold a lot of water. 30 inches of several half-inch pipes is a lot of water, a lot more water than what you would think. And it's going to exceed the capacity of 4 beach towels. 3, don't forget that you have exterior spigots. Yeah, that would have been great to know. 4, compression fittings are not reusable. They're one and done. You gotta replace them. And 5, make sure you've got the right tools. So in closing, I didn't screw this up because I didn't know plumbing. I screwed this up because I charged boldly ahead, deciding, good enough, and then I stopped thinking. Which apparently is how a lot of home projects go.